Hey guys, it's Matt from Eastwood Company. We're here in the Eastwood garage doing another live tech session. For any of you guys that haven't watched one of these before, we want it to be as interactive as possible. So I want you guys to log in, join the chat on Facebook, YouTube, and also on eastwood.com. And we have Randy, as always, that you've seen a lot of our videos, doing the chat over here.
Yeah, if you have any questions, post them in a comment on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll shoot them back over to Matt. And don't forget, you can also watch us at eastwood.com too.
Yes.
So those three, and you don't need Facebook. You don't need a Facebook account or a YouTube account to watch it there, but you do to answer questions.
Perfect. So add any questions you may have about Eastwood products in general, or about what we're talking about specifically today, and we'll do our best to answer them. So today we're going to make a crap ton of noise. So we're going to talk about planishing hammers and some of the basics about using a planishing hammer and some things to look out for and how to use it, a couple different ways to use it I'm going to show you guys today. So let's jump right into it. So the way a planishing hammer works, if you imagine when you're using a hammer and dolly, you have a dolly underneath and you're hammering and smoothing out an area. This does that way faster. So we have on this, we'll get Joe to get in close here. We have a bottom tool holder here, or die holder, and in that there is, and I have a couple of them here, there are these lower dies which have a radius, so each of these have, ooh, I'm trying to hold them straight for you. So I have each of these have a different radius on them. On the bottom of the dies, they each have the radius marked on them. And these have a little bit of radius, much like when we talk about the English wheel, same type of thing, where you want to match the lower die as close as you possibly can to the panel that you're working with. So you want to make sure that the curve of your panel isn't too much for what the bottom die is. The other part of this is the top section here, the actual hammer portion, has a flat, basically a flat surface on that, and that's attached to an air hammer here, which has an air line that goes down. We have it set up for a foot pedal down here, and this foot pedal is hooked up, so you got constant air pressure to your actual hammer, and when you hit the pedal here, it runs your air hammer. And by moving back and forth really, really quickly, it's going to hammer and smooth out an area. Now the top of this, the really important part with this particular model, you need to adjust the force, the amount of how fast it actually hammers, and the force of the hit you want to adjust up here. So you can actually adjust your air pressure right here on the top of the tool, and you can run this all the way from barely hammering it, and you can smooth. You can turn this all the way up to where we can stretch metal. So I'm going to show you both ends of the spectrum and a couple ways that you can use this. So the other thing to mention here as we start, I'm going to have this turned all the way to the right here, and it has basically a section where you can turn this up for material thickness. So if we turn this all the way up, it's basically, other than the little bit of play we have in the tool, in the upper hammer area here, we can slide a piece between here. So you want to make sure that that's up when we're actually using it. So first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to show you guys planishing with the hammer. So I'm going to go over here to the sandbag, and we're going to hammer on this piece here. So we're going to take this on the sandbag here, and I'm going to hammer and put some lumps in it. Told you we're going to make noise. So we got a whole mess of lumps there in the panel. So previously in other videos I've shown you guys how you can put this in the English wheel and you can roll it and slowly work these out. It does take a little bit of time, and you have to change the wheels as you go to kind of get this smoother and match the radius. And then the other thing is you're trying to fill in all these little spots that we missed. The cool thing with the planishing hammer, and I have it turned down a little bit, is we can kind of planish and smooth these out and blend everything together. Definitely get yourself a set of these earmuffs, or if you have just the throwaway jobs that you can put in your ear. But I just went and got a cheap set of hunting or shotgun earmuffs here, and they work well because I can just throw them on and a little quicker. So I'm going to throw them on and we'll show you guys planishing. So we're going to put the panel in, and like I said, I'm going to turn this up. There's enough of a play in there I can actually fit this in, and I got this turned down pretty low. So if you want to come in from over top, you can see as I'm smoothing it out here. So you can see all the little tiny hammer marks that we have here on the panel. As it's hitting, you can see those. As I fill it in, that'll all blend together. Now, a thing you can do if you want this to slide a little easier is you can take a lubricant of some kind and spray it on your panel. It's a little tip. And this will help the panel slide on the hammer a little easier. So I will spray that with that, and now it's going to slide a little easier. You're not going to have to push it as hard. It'll glide across these dies a little easier. So I will show you guys how quickly I was able to smooth that out. And as I worked, you may notice there was areas where I didn't hit with the hammer. I worked those areas a little more, and I was able to kind of bring them up and make everything so it's kind of all in the same plane, so we don't have those extreme highs and lows. And we could quickly raise that area up without too much work. And then this thing's fairly smooth. I mean, you could hit that with a DA sander and that would be ready to go. So say we want, I should ask, do we have any questions as of yet before I go?
Yes, we got one question here on YouTube.
Sure.
Does the planishing hammer shrink or stretch or both?
Okay, good question. So somebody asked to restate it. They were asking, question was if the planishing hammer shrinks or stretches or both. So there's a couple of things you can do with the planishing hammer. What I'm doing here is I have the pressure turned down quite low, about almost as low as it can go. And all I'm doing now is planishing. So this is the same as if you're just lightly tapping with a hammer and dolly and you're smoothing an area out. So we're not actually stretching here, we're just smoothing the area out. We're getting rid of all the highs and lows really quickly because it hits so fast. The other thing this hammer can do, which I'm going to show in a second here, we can crank the pressure up and you can stretch with this machine. It does have the power, just like if you strike really hard with a hammer and dolly, you can stretch. You hit hard enough that it's actually moving the molecules around and stretching the metal. So we can do the same thing with this. We can crank the pressure up and it's going to hit really hard, and we can actually stretch and raise an area up on this piece. Shrinking can be done with a planishing hammer, but it's quite difficult. I haven't tried it too much with this particular hammer. It's difficult. It requires a little bit of skill of actually putting a tuck in it and then actually crushing the tuck out. So it can be done, but it's not something that's real easy, and it's not just a traditional way of shrinking. But you can make a tuck with a tucking fork or in a stump, and you can fit it in the planishing hammer and kind of come up behind it and then actually hammer and pull it out, and it will crush. It'll crush the tuck together and shrink. So that's a little bit of a extra technique that you can't just do. It's not something we can just put it in and do it real easy. But that's a really good question. Anything? Is that the only one we got?
That's all the questions for now.
Cool, good one. So what I'm going to show you guys now is stretching. So you can see we have a little bit of crown in all directions here. So let's say I want to just have it trail out like so. So I'm just roughly, and we want to raise this area out just right there. We could stretch this up with the sandbag, or I can put this in the hammer here and turn it up, and we can stretch up a panel doing it that way. So we're going to turn this up. It's going to get a bit louder, a lot more annoying for your neighbors. And I'm going to just test here. All right, ready to go. So we're going to again put it right back in here. And I'm going to start in the area we've already been stretching or smoothing and work from there. So real quick, Joe could probably get a shot sideways. You can see I've already raised this higher than what we do with the hammer there and planishing just with that little bit. So you got to be careful. This hammer has a lot of power. If you crank it all the way up and you have a good air compressor, you could overstretch it. So we've actually raised it up here. So what I can do is I can blend back into this, but I'm going to go here. I'm going to turn the pressure a little down, and we'll keep going on that same spot there. So you can see pretty quickly, I started blending, so I raised this area up, kind of blended it all together, and then I started blending it out. So we're actually stretching this area out and slowly bleeding the pressure down. So now what I would do is turn this pressure down just a little more, and I can blend it out even a little more. And we're going to get to the point where it's not going to be stretching too much anymore, mainly just planishing. So now I have the pressure turned down, and I'm simply planishing at this point. So I blended it all out. And it's blended down until it comes into here and we have no stretch again. So what I can do is I'm going to spray a little more fluid on it, and then we can planish it, and I'll probably turn it the other way, and I'll wipe it all down. We can show you the finish when you're all done. You can see on the other side here all those little tiny hammer hits. When you spray the lubricant on it, it really highlights them. But you can see all those thousands of tiny little hits it's doing as it's working. So that's what it's doing. You're just overlapping your hit each time and blend it all together so you get a pretty smooth surface on the end. As I'm spraying this, we got any other questions?
Yeah, we have another question here
Sure.
from YouTube. When you're using the planishing hammer and you're pushing the metal back and forth, are you pushing down on the sides of the metal, or is the machine doing the work, or both?
Okay, yeah, good question. So when
That was actually mine. Thank you.
Oh, it's yours.
Yeah.
Great question. Even better. So when you're using a planishing hammer, I'm not really putting any force down on the panel at all. I'm just letting it work. I'm just guiding it back and forth. With an English wheel, you can kind of put some body English into it and make it work a little faster. But with this, there's not much you can do. The only time I would really pull down or put pressure on it is if we were just following the panel. But no, otherwise I'm just guiding it along like this, and I just spray lubricant on it so it slides real nice, especially when you're planishing. But so this one's a lot less work than some of the other tools, which is I'm all for. So I'm going to planish this a little more, and then we'll wipe it down and show you guys. Now, you may see when there's some sections that I haven't planished as much, if you watch the panel, especially when I get out here, you can watch the edges, and the panel is going to vibrate quite a bit versus some other areas. That's an area that hasn't been planished out, and you'll feel that vibration. You know you need to hit that area a little more to get it to smooth out. So when you're feeling those vibrations, that's probably because there's a bunch of highs or lows that need to be smoothed out. So just watch it as I get further out here. You'll see some areas where it'll kind of vibrate more than others. Joe, if you want to get one up here, I'll just show so we can see the actual tracking, kind of like you do with the English wheel we've taught you before, where you're almost overlapping or you're keeping your tracking really close. Very similar with the planishing hammer. With the lubricant on, you guys can probably see pretty easily how I'm doing this. across here. See right here, there's a couple spots that are really low. It might have been a spot I missed with the planishing hammer, or it might be an area where we were switched the pressure and it didn't blend. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit that area going back and forth, and we should be able to raise that back up and get it. So you can see that spot. The other nice thing about spraying the lubricant on is it actually highlights the panel, so it really makes any spots that are extremely low or high show up really quick. So that's why we were able to see those lines, right? Those two lines that were in there. And all I did was, I turned the panel long ways, and I was able to just simply go back and forth over it. And got a fairly good surface there. There's a little spot there. That's where we blended. But I'll hit real quick. So I'll go over this real quick one more time, and then we'll wash it off and let you guys see the finished product here. So, what you may notice when I was getting into sections that are pretty raised, I was starting to turn the panel to the side like this. You don't want to keep the panel flat while you're doing that, because what you'll do is you'll put creases in the panel. Because when you're turning it like this, you're hitting the edge of the edge of the hammer on the bottom anvil or die, and you're going to put lines in the panel. So you don't want to do that. You're going to start seeing big low spots or divots in the panel when you start doing that. So when you're doing a panel that has some curve to it, make sure you're working the panel so that it best fits. So over in these areas, I'm turning to the side like that. So let me spray this off with some pre. And we'll, show you guys the finish. And I mean, I just worked this real quick. You could spend a lot more time if you want to really work it. So there's still a couple stray hits that we did out here where you could turn the hammer down and planish those out, or you could just hit it with a hammer and dolly really quick. So get a shot across the surface. Fairly smooth. Like I said, there's some tiny little spots where we could keep working the panel and get it to smooth out even more. Or depending on the quality of the work that you're looking for, you could simply hit this with an 80 grit and knock any of those little tiny spots off. You'd be ready for a high build primer or epoxy primer, and that would fill those in. So you could see, you know, we did a lot of stretching in here. I even blended out at the end. I started blending it out into here to smooth out. So you can use the hammer. You just got to know how to turn the pressure so that you're not stretching too much. This thing will stretch very quickly, so that can cause a problem. Any other questions?
Yeah, we got one last question here.
Sure.
Do you typically use the planishing hammer for the major part of the fabrication, or are you using it as a finishing tool after using other tools? Like when you started,
right,
you used the bag, but then you used it as its own tool, I guess.
Yeah, if I'm putting some, like, generally it's the planishing hammer would be kind of a finish tool for the most part. It's a lot quicker to do like I did in the beginning, where you hit it with the hammer to put the metal where you need it to be, to put the rough stretch in, and then you can work it from there. So if you want to make sure that you're in the right area, you got the right amount of stretch, you can hit it, put it in the planisher, planish it out, get it kind of roughed in, and then keep fitting it to whatever you're doing. But for the most part, you use this for finishing like I was doing there. But it is a little more, a little easier, I should say, for some people, or quicker. If you need to stretch up just a little area, you can put it in the hammer and stretch up. Actually, I'll show you guys. You can stretch something up really quick, just in a little tiny area that would be tough to do with a hammer or even with a, let's put a different anvil in here. The other thing to mention is, I'm going to confess to you guys, these don't come polished from the factory, but all I did, it took maybe 15 minutes. I took a DA sander and started with 120, 220, 400, 600, 1,000, and 1,500 on a DA, and that brought these up to a mirror polish. So they come with a coating on them so that they don't rust from the factory. So what I do is I polish them up real quick. It's going to give you a better finish on your panel as well, just so nobody's alarmed if they buy one of these and see that it's not as shiny. So here, I'll show you just stretching. If you want to stretch just a little spot right in the center here. So, real quick, I put that nice smooth, putting streaks in it. I put a nice smooth, just raised area that quick. I mean, to do that with a hammer would take a lot more time. To do this in the English wheel would be nearly impossible unless you had a really, really sharp die, and even then it would be difficult to put just a little area like that in it. So this, if I was doing, to kind of end the answer for that question, a good time to use this if you are, for major portion of the fabrication, if you're doing something like a motorcycle gas tank out of aluminum, It stretches a lot easier. You can crank this thing up and you could rough in the side of a motorcycle gas tank pretty quickly with this thing. But if I'm doing larger panels and you're putting stretch in it, it's better to use an English wheel or to use a sandbag or something like that to put your initial stretch in, and then use the planishing hammer to smooth and planish out. So, but that's a good question. So that's a couple of my tips. That's just a introduction to our planishing hammer. Oh, the other thing to mention, if you want to knock down sound, this has on the back of it here, there's and in the front and the legs here, and in the side there's the other one. So you can fill these up with sand or media, like we sell for media blasting. And if you get really crazy and you have plenty of money to spend, you can put some shot in there and make it really heavy. But sand works fine. That will deaden the rattling of this. This thing does make a lot of noise. So if your neighbors are already mad at you, what? They're gonna make you're gonna make them even more mad. Or if you want to have a neighbor you want to piss off, it's a good way to do it. So that's all I got. If you have any other questions before? All right, so that's all I got for the planishing hammer. Thanks, guys, for watching. As always, if you have anything you'd like to see us use that's a new tool that's out, or a project or something that you'd like to see live, make sure you drop us a comment. And also, don't forget, we do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We are doing live broadcasts on Eastwood.com, Facebook, and YouTube. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'll catch you next time.